So, folks, as many of you may or may not know, The Atlantic publishes a lot of absolute garbage. Like, just absolutely terrible articles. And it makes me mad in a way that is difficult to really encapsulate. Because while it does try and have an intellectual veneer to it, it's really no better at the end of the day than the New York Post. You know, it's some real garbage takes published in the Atlantic. That's not to say everyone that works there or everything they publish is bad, but this piece in particular is emblematic of exactly what I mean. Okay? This was published today by Ben Appel in defense of effeminate boys. If anyone had suggested that I might really be a girl, I don't know how I would have responded. And this is just one of these articles that comes along every so often about trans people that makes me really mad. It upsets me. Because the argument that gets put forward here is, oh, well, you know gay people. If you approached a gay man and told him at some point when he was vulnerable that he was actually a dog, he might have believed you. And it's just like that's the level these articles operate on, right? Like it's like some kind of wonky alternate universe where like if someone just is like goes up to a cis man and is like, "Do you think you could be a girl?" They live in a universe where that might persuade them to become a woman. And that's crazy. That's just genuinely insane. But there are some people on the left and the right who believe that that's how this works. And I wanted to go through this article and talk about it. All right? So let's do it. Okay? Growing up, I was quite the sissy boy. Hey, Nancy, people who called my family's house would say if I happened to pick up the phone. Nancy is my mother's name. No, it's her son, Ben. I'd respond, and the caller would apologize profusely, as if there was no greater tragedy for a boy than being mistaken for a girl. But I didn't know how to feel this type of shame. I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian community called the Lamb of God, and, perhaps surprising, no one seemed to care about my flamboyance. What mattered was that my heart was on fire for the Lord. The differences between me and the other boys became clear to me only at age 12, when I enrolled in 7th grade at a public middle school. About a week into the school year, one of my teachers asked for a volunteer to fetch a box of chalk from the neighboring classroom, and I dutifully raised my hand. I went out to the next classroom and rapped gently on the door window pane. Can I interrupt you for a moment? I asked the teacher, too fastidiously for a middle school boy. The class snickered. Is that a boy or a girl? A kid whispered as I crossed the room. Ben gay. My schoolmates soon began to call me. Ben is a F-slur, someone scribbled in my school library book. Years later, I would come out as gay. I married a man. As an adult, I vowed to help create a world where sissy boys like me could find space in society to be themselves, without any pressure to change, a goal that still feels urgent today. What I know now is that gender nonconformity didn't disqualify me from being male. Effeminate boys, however atypical, are a natural variation of their own sex. The notion that they are really girls is anything but progressive. So I'm gonna stop you right here, right? Because this idea that, like, trans girls are actually just effeminate sissy boys is frankly disgusting. It's disgusting. These are two different groups of people. It's like saying, like, if you made the right argument, a compelling set of cases to a butch lesbian, that they would become a trans man. And that's just not how that works, actually. Like, there's a deep sickness here.
Do you feel like an ever-present dream of a great America in the politics of some Democrats and leftists hinders truly having change for the people who have to be here?
Thank you for the $10 super chat. Do you feel like an ever-present dream of a great America in the politics of some Democrats and leftists hinders truly having a change for the people who have to be here? I think it sometimes can. for the people who are too busy LARPing to actually want to do the work. Does that make sense? Like, there are some people for whom, the communist revolution is always just a little bit away, but, it never seems to materialize, and they just sit and do nothing but, like, talk to their insular circles and never really do anything. And, however, I think there is something to be said that you need a dream. You need, like, an aspiration. You need to be able to at least articulate something like that so that people are willing to follow you and, like, share that dream and idea, Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream, and that dream continues on to this day because we all share that dream. And I think that that is an important touchstone for everyone who wants to make a more progressive movement. So I think it can be both. It really depends on how you try and effectuate that change and that dream. Some people hold a dream and they always stay asleep. But the people who wake up and share that dream with other people, well, that's a really powerful thing. But MLK solved racism forever. Oh, so true. So true. No. All right. So, back to what I'm talking about here, right? Which is this idea here that, like, oh, well, femboys are the same as trans girls. No. Femboys don't wake up wishing that they were girls. Cis men can be femboys. They can be, hyper masculine men. They can be any kind of presentation they prefer. Okay? It is, I think, really important to make sure that people know this isn't an arbitrary distinction. Like a femboy and a trans girl, it's not an arbitrary difference.
If you're so unsure of your gender identity that just suggesting that you could be trans would make you trans, maybe work though some things. I fit into several gay, trans stereotypes. Still cis het.
Exactly, Pluvius. Exactly. Like, if someone mentioning that you could be trans is what transes you, you were already trans. Alright? But I gotta tell you, a lot of femboys are pretty solid in their gender identities as men. Like, it's... And if, to the extent that they're not, like, yeah, that's because non-binary folks exist, and, like, trans girls exist, because sometimes, a femboy is a trans girl. Oh, I was told I might be, so I must transition. No, don't stop me, I must. I have to, you see? It's so silly. I have driven a Subaru, still a man.
Finally,
Fair.
Haven't caught you live in a minute.
Fair.
Just wanted to say seeing you do what you do with 2 targets on your back is beyond inspiring. Keep up with the fight cause I believe in you, girl.
Thanks. Though, when you say targets on my back, I'm really grateful there's just a wall behind me. Thank you for subscribing, I appreciate it. Thank you for being subscribed for a year. Alright, let's dive back into this, okay? Years later... Oh wait, we already read that part. My childhood experiences make me skeptical about pediatric gender medicine today. And it's just like, okay, wait a minute. Your experiences with not medicine make you skeptical of medical intervention you don't need. This is like saying, well, I didn't have leukemia as a child, which leads me to be skeptical of all that oncology I'm aware of. Understand how stupid and insubstantial this argument is. It's so bad. It's so fucking bad. Right? Like, I hope my comparisons are really hammering it home for you guys, because, again, saying, like, oh, well, I'm worried that maybe this medical practice might infringe on people like me, when it's not doing that, is very weird. Okay? Alright. In many kids who grow up to be gay, gender nonconformity manifests long before overt same-sex attraction does. Yet from peers, from social media, and even from some school districts' teaching material, kids learn simplistic lessons that equate gender nonconformity with gender dysphoria. In essence, if you act and dress like a girl, you are one. And I just have to say, what are you talking about? Like, genuinely, what are you talking about? Because kids in school aren't being taught, hey, if you dress like a girl, you are one. That's not at all what kids are being taught. To the extent kids are being taught what gender dysphoria is at all, which the overwhelming majority of them aren't. But in the cases where they are taught what gender dysphoria is, that's not the lesson. He didn't cite shit there. He cited another Atlantic article by Connor Friesdorf. All right. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Yeah, what to teach young kids about gender. Schools should tell children to be themselves, but some districts say too much and mistake progressive dogma for established fact. Oh, okay. Resources and lesson plans for those who want to teach about gender identity are becoming more common. Oh, okay, so we're going to now go over to this instead. Oh, we can't get to that one? That's too bad. But like, okay, so in order to get to the information that you're trying to cite in this one, we have to go through 3 other bad faith sources to get to the actual fundamental, like, information you are trying to cite. And not only that, I can just tell you, that's not how gender dysphoria is defined. Not by most schools, I can't say all schools, but also, importantly, not for the cases of diagnosable gender dysphoria in gender medicine, right? Like, the important thing here is like, okay, so your worst case scenario here is that kids get taught something incorrect in school, and then they take that incorrect information, they go to the gender clinic to like get, or, you know, sorry, not even the gender clinic. They go to their GP, their general practitioner, and say, hey, I think I might be trans. And then what? The entire medical establishment, all doctors are just wrong on this topic? That's crazy. That's crazy. But let's keep going here. In essence, if you act like a girl, act and dress like a girl, you are one. In recent years, many doctors and hospitals have been willing to provide puberty blockers and gender-related hormone treatments to minors only after the briefest evaluation of each patient's circumstances, and LGBTQ activists have cheered the lack of gatekeeping. That's a fucking lie. Is anything cited in this circumstance? No. Nothing is cited for this particular part of the article. And I can tell you why that is. Because children have to go through the medical system. If you're an adult, you can go and get what's called informed consent. Meaning you go to a gender clinic and they tell you, okay, here are what the side effects are. Do you accept, you know, like that these are the effects of this drug and this is the side effects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you go, yes. Okay. And then they're like, cool, here's a prescription. And we're going to do some, first we're going to do some blood work. We'll let you know if you can get a prescription. And then they do the blood work. They send you a prescription. Boom, you're ready to go. But that's only if you are an adult. For children, the process is extraordinarily different. You go to your general practitioner. You say, with your kid, you know, and your kid's like, I think I might be trans. And the doctor says, okay. Why do you think that? And the kid like explains like, oh, well, you know, blah, 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 blah. I've always identified as blah. Then the doctor goes, cool. And depending on how old that kid is, if that kid is like, then they're like, well, all right. So try that out. Come see me, you know, again for your yearly checkup next year. We'll talk about it again then. And for that kid, whenever they start puberty, what then happens is that, oh, well, we now send you to a gender clinic, a specialist in gender medicine who can assess you and look at the history that you have developed with your general practitioner to see if there is a consistent identification over the years with another gender category, because that consistency is what distinguishes someone from being, generally like trans or still figuring themselves out, because it's a big decision what kind of puberty you want to go through. And the reason that kids get puberty blockers is because that decision is really important and a big deal. And what puberty blockers do is it allows those kids to have multiple additional years to sort themselves out with no ill effects in the long term. Okay? And we know that there are, and by no ill effects, there's obviously the qualifier that, any medication has side effects and carries with it risks, et cetera, et cetera. The same with anything else that you put in your body, might I add, any food, any medication, et cetera. And so what ends up happening is that then the doctor's like, okay, well, you have puberty blockers. You've been on puberty blockers for a few years now. Maybe you come in for a bit more frequent checkups. And then you make a decision at some point whether to stop the puberty blockers and have your original puberty, and then carry on your merry way, no ill effects for the rest of your life, or you start HRT and you go through a normal puberty at a normal time. And guess what? You just have the one puberty. You don't go through two. Also, John Smith, the lower bone density is temporary. The lower bone density is temporary because as soon as you start either your natural puberty or you start HRT, bone density issues solve themselves. Once you start your hormones, either through your body's processes or through HRT, boom, the bone density is fine. So what ends up happening is those kids, as they go through puberty and go through their adolescence, wind up being evaluated by multiple doctors. Because at this point, you have your general practitioner, you have a specialist who consults with the GP, then you have their gender care provider for over the course of multiple years, and then when they're adults, they can get their surgeries. But you'll notice something in these articles, right? Which is there is constant hand-wringing over trans kids stealing something from cis kids. And I just want to point out that cis kids get to have gender-affirming care. If a cis boy is feeling really uncomfortable with their gynomastia and just have larger or orbular chest shape. I'm not using words correctly there, but I think you understand what I mean. That cis boy can have those removed. If a cis girl has, breasts that are so big that they cause her discomfort, she can have those reduced in size. But for some reason, and by the way, if a cis boy is low on testosterone, that cis boy can get HRT in order to boost their testosterone levels. But for some reason, people like, Ben Appel feel compelled to take away gender-affirming care for trans kids. Well, essentially saying, well, cis kids get to have that, but not trans kids. They're different. They're sneaky. They're stealing something from the cis kids by existing. It's really, really disgusting. If medical authorities have a rigorous way of distinguishing effeminate boys from transgender kids, or if distinguishing transgender kids from proto-gay kids, they aren't saying. Again, this is where I fucking lost it, okay? Which is the fact that gender clinicians and gender clinics and doctors do talk about this. They talk about it extensively in the research. They talk about it extensively at the clinics. They talk about it extensively with the patients. The only way you can come to this conclusion is if you haven't looked into this at all. And if you, frankly are just complaining, about the fact that, like, well, nobody ever told me what the process was. And it's like, well, yeah, because no one had to. You weren't trans. You weren't a trans kid. No one had to explain this to you. The same way no one had to explain to you the steps involved in treating leukemia when you're a kid, because you didn't get leukemia when you were a kid, and you never bothered to look into it. Like, I want to tell you guys, every single anti-trans outburst these days.
According to one of my coworkers, the proper Bostonian term for gynecomastia is chesticles.
Nice. But the reality here is, like, you felt like society owed you a ready explanation already years ago, and now you're taking out your frustration at not having that answer on trans kids by trying to take away their medical care. You know? Like, that's what's happening here. Like, you felt you were so owed in-depth knowledge about how youths transition, and you didn't have it, and now you're going to, like, you view that as a wrong done to you. You view your own incuriosity as a wrong society did to you. It's really, really gross. I have met a number of detransitioned gay men who tried to live as women for a time because they and their families were so averse to homosexuality. According to a 2019 report in the Times of London, staffers at Britain's foremost gender identity clinic joked darkly that, as a result of the facility's work, there would be no gay people left. A statement last month by the American Society of Plastic Surgeons noted that there is no validated way to assess whether a child's gender distress will persist over time or disappear without medical intervention. A lack of good research and record-keeping means that we may never know how many patients who would have been considered effeminate gay boys not so long ago have undergone medical treatments for gender dysphoria. And I just want to say the American Society of Plastic Surgeons is one of the only mainstream medical organizations to put out any kind of statement against, like, transition care at all. It's genuinely wild to me. Oh, well, that's interesting. Let's just take a look real quick at that statement that the American Society of Plastic Surgeons put out. That is the basis for this claim. And oddly enough, that Atlantic article doesn't link to this. Well, let's take a look here. Clinical management of children and adolescents presenting with gender dysphoria or gender incongruence has undergone rapid change, and ASPS wishes to offer guidance to members providing gender surgery services for this population. This position statement discusses the views of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons on breast, chest, genital, and facial gender surgery for individuals under the age of 19. Huh. Well, that's interesting. What does that mean? What is a position statement on gender dysphoria and surgical intervention? Well, it should be noted that a position statement is, oddly enough, not a guideline statement. It is not the same thing, in fact. And the position being put out there is essentially, oh, well, you know, something different could have happened if no medical intervention had occurred, which is literally always the case. Literally always the case. It's so frustrating to see this happen again and again. I don't really know how to be more blunt about this. This is not clinical practice guidelines. This is not governing how plastic surgeons are going to be making their decisions going forward. It's effectively catnip for the political anti-trans crusaders. That's all it is, really. If it's a drink, drink it. What? Drink water. I see. It's essentially a glorified press release, but when you start looking into the origins of this, wouldn't you know it, there's a reason this is not a guideline document. because the Trump administration put immense pressure out there to form this over the course of like 2 weeks. This was fabricated by the Trump administration in a remarkably short amount of time. There are multiple assertions, depending on who gets asked, about the origins of this document. Some people say, oh, we've been working on it for years. But then it really seems like the Trump administration were the ones who brought it into being. Wait, I think almost every trans person has been told to just wait or try something else instead of transitioning. Almost every trans person will also tell you that they wish they could have started sooner, and waiting did nothing but make them feel like time was wasted. True. Also, in this document, at the bottom of every page of this position statement is a disclaimer. Okay, what does this disclaimer say? ASPS is committed to patient safety, access to care, and the highest quality standards of patient care. The contents are not intended to serve as a standard of care or legal advice. Information and regulations may change over time, and practitioners are solely responsible for complying with current applicable law and standards of care. Practitioners are encouraged to consult legal counsel in the state of practice regarding local standards and responsibilities. So none of this is at all guidance to plastic surgeons. And again, I want to put this out there, which is this statement. I have met a number of detransitioned gay men who tried to live as women for a time because they and their families were so averse to homosexuality. Now, I don't know about you guys. I have never in my life met someone who said, I have to transition because my family loves and accepts trans people more than they accept gay men. And like, I genuinely, I struggle to imagine a situation in which that might be. Yeah, maybe there are cases in like different countries where legally, in order to get married to a man, you are forced to transition. Something like that, like some weird like legal reason happening here. But I have genuinely never heard of this happening. And I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I am saying that like the idea that like, oh, trans women are all just secretly gay men is deeply offensive. It's deeply offensive. I was disowned for being trans. It would have been fine if I were gay. In my case, I'm pretty sure my dad would have had a much easier time if I had just been a gay man. Like, if I had just been like a bisexual man, my dad would have had a way easier time with me coming out. Being a trans woman was a bridge too far for my dad. In this case, I'm really struggling with this piece. Okay? Really struggling with this piece. Also, there's no validated way to assess whether a child's gender distress will persist over time or disappear without medical intervention. We also have no validated way of assessing whether or not someone has clinical depression other than their self-reported statements. If your standard for who gets mental health treatment is just, well, we need to be able to 100% validate whether or not you have depression, then no one's going to get like antidepressants, man. The way we treat mental health issues in this country is through self-report. That is how we are able to assess. And when somebody has chronic depression, they have had depression for a prolonged period of time and it has not gone away. I know this because I have chronic depression and a generalized anxiety disorder. And like, that's how that works, right? Like, you go to a doctor and you talk about your symptoms and what you're experiencing, and over time, your doctor is able to create like a history for you that demonstrates what your conditions are and what might help you, and come up with a treatment plan. It's not insane. It's not like this oh, we're just incapable of wrapping our minds around it. Like, we understand this. And it's the same for gender dysphoria. But you could do this same fucking trick with literally any kind of mental issue. Like, well, we can't assess whether or not you're going to continue to be depressed, so we're just going to leave you to be depressed. Maybe you'll shake yourself out of it, or, maybe you'll kill yourself. But one way or the other, it'll all sort out. And that's really what this author is saying about trans kids. Like, well, either you're going to be a gay man, or maybe you won't live long enough to be a man. So it'll sort itself out. And ultimately, what I feel like this comes down to is that this author is deeply uncomfortable with the idea of trans people existing. Right? This crap legitimately gets people killed. This crap does legitimately get people killed. Okay? A lack of good research and record keeping means that we may never know how many patients who would have been considered effeminate gay boys not so long ago have undergone medical treatments for gender dysphoria. Well, here's a good test. Ask your gay friends, are you a cis man? And if they say yes, they're a gay man. And if they say no, they might be a queer non-binary person. Or a trans girl. You might learn something about your friends that's interesting. But the issue is trying to say that, like, oh, the trans activists think all the gay men are secretly trans girls. That's not the case. That is a fiction being developed by bigots who hate trans people. God, what's the author's name? Ben Appel. Or Appel. To be sure, a backlash is now underway. The majority of red states have now banned medical treatments intended to alter minors' external sex traits. Although most prominent physician associations support the use of medical treatments in gender-questioning kids, the ASPS, citing low certainty evidence and potential long-term harm, asserted in its February statement that gender surgery should not be performed on minors. Soon afterwards, the American Medical Association issued a statement broadly agreeing with the ASPS position. And I just want to say, the ASPS did not put that out. If the ASPS had put out a statement saying gender surgery should not be performed on minors, then I just want to put out there that perhaps they would not have put a disclaimer on the bottom of every fucking page of the statement saying that this was not a standard of care or legal advice. Just a thought. Now, as for the other organization here, the American Medical Association, that's interesting. It's weird that they talk about the American Medical Association agreeing with the ASPS, considering this was their statement from a handful of years ago. Oh, let's take a look here. Here's an actual article about the American Medical Association's statement. Did the American Medical Association change its position on surgery for transgender minors? Group's statement and responses to it reflect high-stakes politics around the issue. Among clinicians who provide gender-affirming care, the general consensus is that surgery on breasts, facial features, or genitals is mostly reserved for adults, though it should be available to minors on a case-by-case basis. But when the American Medical Association told some media organizations last week that, quote, surgical interventions in minors should be generally deferred to adulthood, unquote, conservative commentators that want to end any pediatric gender-affirming medical care celebrated. Some media outlets and online commentators have also interpreted the comment as a backpedal on previous support. The American Medical Association supports evidence-based treatment, including gender-affirming care, reads the comment, which was not published on its site or attributed to any of the group's leaders, but it goes on to call the evidence for surgery on minors insufficient and says that, in the absence of clear evidence, the AMA agrees with ASPS that surgical interventions in minors should be generally deferred to adulthood. Well, the AMA's statement posted on X by a writer at the National Review is less of a departure from the group's past positions than either conservatives or trans rights activists are contending. Its issuance and the reactions it sparked are indicative of a high-stakes political moment in which caring for transgender young people can draw the ire of the federal government. So, to be very clear here, the ASPS has not changed its position, which is that generally surgery should be reserved until someone's an adult, which is true. You know, generally speaking, that's true for cis kids for gender affirming surgeries as well as trans kids for gender affirming surgeries. But there are going to be extenuating circumstances where, for example, a cis girl needs to have breast reduction surgery because it's causing her pain. Or in this case, perhaps like a trans boy needs to get chest surgery in order to be affirmed. And like, this is what I'm talking about when I say like the Atlantic is a fucking rag. Running this piece where it's just blatantly fucking dishonest. The American Medical Association issued a statement broadly agreeing with the ASPS's position. And then you actually look into it and it is, let's see, like one sentence long. So the full statement here, sorry, it's 3 sentences long. It's 3 sentences long. That's their full statement. Trans people have to put up with so much bullshit. These steps towards caution are wise, but an underlying problem remains. Society still has an irrational fear of effeminate boys, who should be free to live their life without altering anything about themselves. Which, I want to say, for the record, I agree. Boys who are effeminate should be allowed to exist and be just who they are. Like, that's a wonderful thing. Girls who are tomboys, wonderful thing. But, like, trans people aren't saying that just because you're an effeminate boy, you're a trans girl. And that's the fundamental assumption throughout this entire article, that trans people are out there being like, yes, an effeminate boy, an effeminate child, we must have him. We will make him a her. Like, that's genuinely what they think is happening here. And it's fucking insane lunacy. Okay? Gender non-conforming children continue to get the strong impression from censorious peers and well-meaning adults alike that they'd be better off if they became something other than what they are. And I just don't think that's the case. I don't think that's true or that's happening. Okay? In my case, as puberty took its course, I came to realize that much of what my peers were saying about me was true, and homosexuality, I knew in my bones, meant AIDS and hell. Had anyone suggested then, amid my confusion and distress, that I might be a girl instead of a boy, I wonder how I might have responded. If a teacher, a guidance counselor, or a therapist had told me I'd been born in the wrong body and that there was a medical solution, I might have jumped at it. You mean this isn't a spiritual defect? I'm not evil? It's just a medical condition? There wouldn't have been anything weird about my interests and behaviors, or with liking boys, if I was just a girl. That's true. Society doesn't have a problem with effeminate women liking boys. That's true. But there's a major fucking caveat here, which is that society fucking hates trans girls. The patriarchy we live in fucking hates trans women. The idea that it would just be easier to be a trans woman. No, it's fucking not. Are you kidding? God. Jack, when people say there have been trans people for thousands of years, what does that mean? It means that as far back as you can go in history, there have been trans people and gender non-conforming people and non-binary people. For example, one that I like to cite because it is a legally recognized third gender in India, the most populous country on the planet, the Hijra. The Hijra have existed in India basically as far back as you can go with literature. Hijra are mentioned in the Kama Sutra. They are mentioned throughout history as holding different important religious and political positions. It is literally a fact of history that trans people have existed. And the idea that, like, oh, trans is just this new thing. No, it's not. When I started going to public middle school in 1995, nary a pride flag was to be found on the campus. I was on my own. My survival instincts kicked in. I had to man up. Farewell, honey blonde highlights, which I'd cultivated over the summer with sun in. Hello, basic brown hair. So long, seafoam green tees and tailored trousers. Hello, grunge and flannel. I tossed my Mariah Carey CDs in my Little Pony collection and invested in Nirvana and Airwalks. I was constantly preoccupied with what I absolutely should not do. Tuck my hair behind my ears, stand with my hand on my hips, say words with a lot of S's in them, laugh. It worked up to a point. I blended in, became one of many. Just another boy. The costs of enduring bullying, suppressing my inherent femininity, and failing to square my growing attraction to men with my religious upbringing all became clear over the next decade in the form of a drug addiction, a few psych ward stays, and the beginning of a long recovery. And I just want to say, the sad part about this article is that this sounds like a person who has a lot in common with a lot of trans people. I can tell you, having grown up in like a religious fundamentalist house, I can tell you, being a closeted trans girl was not fun. It did not make my life easier. Knowing that if I came out as a trans girl, I would lose my family. That did not, in fact, make my life easier. And it did not make it easier to blend in, knowing I was a trans girl with fucking facial hair. Okay? That did not make my life easy. But I can tell you that almost every trans people I know, every trans person I know would find this particular paragraph really telling, really resonant, okay? Is the author a closeted trans person? No, they're a fucking bigoted gay person. A bigoted gay man. I would hope that would be obvious by now. No, this guy is not a fucking egg, guys. This guy is an effeminate gay man who has weaponized that status in order to fucking punch down on trans girls. Okay? Like, stop it. Stop it. What he's saying is that we're stealing effeminate gay men from him and future generations. That's what he's saying. He's saying trans people are sneaky fucking thieves that are coming in to steal the gays. That's what he's saying. He's saying we are duplicitous, we are fucking liars, and we are stealing the gays away. And that is why people like this fucking hate trans people. Because they view us as coming into their territory and stealing their guys. And so they lash out at us. Because they can't fucking handle trans people existing. They view it as theft. The same way, like, your, like, cis dads who are transphobic view, like, a girl, like, their trans daughter transitioning as the theft of their son. It's the same fucking thing, just coming from a gay man. That's it. Okay? Disgusting. What makes me more angry about this is that, again, there's this commonality here. And that commonality should be grounds for solidarity, for supporting one another. And I know I would fucking take a bullet for my gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. But in this particular case, this guy would never fucking take a bullet for someone like me. Eventually, I found a 12-step program and put down the drugs. As my mental health improved, I worked as a hairstylist. Met a guy, got involved in the fight for marriage equality in my home state. Winning that campaign in 2012 made me feel righteous again, for the first time since I'd left the Lamb of God. After I got married in my early 30s, I went back to school, enrolling at Columbia University to study creative writing, and worked as an intern for a prominent LGBTQ group. Oh wow, how proud they must be of you. Finally doing the good work of punching the T out of your LGBT group. Cool. It was in those spaces in the late 2010s that I realized that the fundamentalist Christians I'd grown up with weren't the only people enforcing rigid ideas of how others should think. After arriving in New York with mainstream democratic views, I took classes heavy on critical theories that fixated on identity categories and reflexively decried capitalism in the West. Within influential LGBTQ organizations, gay rights had given way to radical queer politics, and academic theories about sex and gender had hardened into doctrine. Widespread revulsion toward Donald Trump had narrowed the boundaries of permissible discussion on the left. The more Trump and his followers oppressed something, the more we were supposed to support it. The prevailing view was that any debate within our side would become ammunition for the right. This fucking guy is basically saying, like, we should have pushed the trans people out. That's what he's saying. He's saying Donald Trump prevented us from doing what we should have done to trans people a long time ago. It's fucking gross. For a long time, I feared that if I didn't keep my thoughts to myself, I would lose the only community I'd ever really belonged in. As controversy flared up nationally about pediatric gender medicine, though, I started voicing concerns, rooted in my own experiences, over what looked to me like a rush to medical treatment. For all the sloganeering about protecting trans kids, I heard no discussion about protecting effeminate gay boys from unnecessary medicalization. When I and others asked whether progressive norms might be nudging effeminate gay boys to think of themselves as girls, no one wanted to hear it. Instead of answers, we were given the LGBTQ community's official line. Gender identity and sexual orientation are two different things, the Human Rights Campaign asserts. But the confidence with which people claim that the two have nothing to do with each other is hard to square with research findings. According to data collected mostly before the recent surge in pediatric dysphoria diagnoses, most prepubescent children who experience gender distress went on to experience same-sex attraction and ultimately did not pursue a gender transition. Of 70 adolescents whom Dutch clinicians subjected to puberty suppression from 2000 to 2008, the overwhelming majority were attracted exclusively to people of their biological sex. So, he's saying that because there may exist a link between someone's sexuality, like a trans person's sexuality and their gender identity, that this is reason to not provide gender affirming care to trans people. This is like just like I bet you didn't know that there are some trans people who are gay and some trans people who are straight. Again, his idea is just like, oh, the medical establishment is taking advantage of trans people.
I did all the wicked things after being tempted when I was young, but now I embrace conservative Jesus. Give me a break.
Activists attempt to impose social costs on people who voice reasonable misgivings about youth gender medicine. Someone added me to an online blacklist, so now when someone Googles me, one of the first hits is a page titled, Ben Appel versus Transgender People. It includes personal details not only about me, but also about my family members. It states falsely that I'm associated with an anti-trans hate group. Yeah, I wonder why someone might associate Ben Appel with people who don't like trans people. Couldn't possibly get why. To support my writing, I work in sales. At my former job, someone who disagreed with me on pediatric gender medicine contacted my employer's CEO to report my journalistic work. This wasn't a great way to meet the boss, but thankfully my antagonist failed to get me fired. The interpersonal costs have been worse than the professional ones. 2 years ago, at my best friend's baby shower, someone I have known for decades, someone who came to my wedding and my father's funeral, who has seen me ugly cry on many occasions, bristled when I hugged her, and later told a mutual acquaintance that I was hurting trans kids. Objectively, you are saying trans kids should not receive medical treatment. That is objectively the thing you are advocating for in this very piece of writing. Come the fuck on. After I published a memoir late last year, another friend wrote on my Facebook page, "You and your book are disgusting." At times, I've been tempted to join the right, especially because so many conservatives have been kind to me, and my own people have been so cruel.
Ben Rappel just throwing himself more and more rope. Typical.
I like that joke, Jazz Dog. But like, I've been tempted to throw my lot in with conservatives because they're nice to me as they try to take away my right to get married to my husband. Is an insane fucking take. But the politicization of gender nonconforming kids is what has made healthy debate about it so difficult, and my leaving one side for the other would only add to the problem. We need less black and white thinking about this complex issue. It's not complicated. The major medical organizations all agree on gender-affirming care. All of them. Every single major medical institution agrees on gender-affirming care. You know? Like, again, we go back to this. The American Society of Plastic Surgeons. Position on gender surgery for children and adolescents. This position statement has nothing to do with gender-affirming care. It is a reiteration of the idea that, generally speaking, trans kids should wait until they're 18 to get their surgeries. However, that is just a generally speaking, because, again, this is a position statement. It is not guidelines on treatment or care. But Ben Appel doesn't fucking care about that distinction. Because there is no debate on whether or not gender care should be available to kids who need it. There's no fucking debate. It's so frustrating to even be met with the idea that there should be one, because to me, this is like saying, well, you know, we should have a debate about whether or not gay people deserve rights. Or like saying, you know, there's some valid questions about insert minority group here. We should have a debate on that. And the answer, when someone's like, we should have a debate on black people, or we should have a debate on Italians, or we should have a debate on the Jews. Like, the answer to someone who says and sets up something like that, or proposes something like that, is to tell them to fuck right off into the sun. That's the proper response. And, like, the idea he's putting forward here that, like, well, it's a complicated issue, we need to have a lot of debates on it. It's not a complicated issue. It's settled science. And I'm sorry if that doesn't agree with you, but, like, maybe you should fuck right off to the sun. Meanwhile, real kids who don't understand much about, again, real kids who don't understand much about gender and sexuality are experiencing confusion and being bullied. How are adults supposed to respond in the moment to a little boy who demands long dresses and dolls and who insists that he's really a girl? What do we tell him when he comes home from school crying about how different he feels from his peers? Well, one, if your kid is telling you that they identify as a girl, and then your kid comes home crying every day because people are making fun of, like, her for not being a real girl or something like that, you fucking hug your kid and you love your kid and you get them the medical care that they need. You don't tell them, well, you're really a boy, and become the biggest bully in your kid's life. Your kid's life is not improved by you bullying them. And I feel like that should be such an obvious thing that I shouldn't even have to explain. But here we are. Yeah, if your kid comes home crying because kids made fun of them for being gay, you don't go, well, it's wrong to be gay, and then make fun of them for being gay. You don't tell them, you can't be gay because only straight people exist. You can't be doing that shit. You will destroy your relationship with that child. Yeah, estranged parent speedrun at any percent. But let's see what Ben Appel's position is. You know, Ben Appel's kid comes home crying because Ben Appel's kid says, I'm a girl, I love wearing dresses and playing with dolls, and I genuinely identify as being a girl. Well, here's what Ben Appel's suggestion is. My suggestion is to tell him the truth. The difference he feels is real. He is unlike most of his peers. Throughout history, there has always been a minority of people who share the interests of and behave more like the opposite sex, and he happens to be one of those people. And this means that from time to time, he might be on the receiving end of cruelty because people often fear what they don't understand. In many situations, he might feel like he doesn't quite fit in because society is organized in a way that suits the majority. What all of this means is that he will need to be just a little bit stronger than his peers. Soon enough, he'll find others who are like him, and all will be well. In the meantime, let him wear the dress and carry the doll if he pleases. Boys can do those things too. And I just want to say, again, the important thing that trans people and trans allies are pointing out is not that if you have a kid who wants to wear dresses and play with dolls, trans people and allies are not saying that kid is a girl. That's not the important component in any of that. What is the most important component of that? It's right here. Who insists that he is really a girl? Because I'll tell you something right now, cisgender people do not insist that they are a different gender identity. That doesn't happen. And when you are saying these things and invalidating your kid's gender identity, you are not building a connection between yourself and your kid. You are alienating your kid and telling them you are not a safe person for themselves, for them to be honest about themselves with you.
It's just performative cruelty. The amount of time and effort spent just to hurt people is absurd.
It really, really is. Like, this piece made me so infuriatingly angry today. Like, I'm so fucking tired, guys. I know I've spent far more time on this than maybe it deserves. Fuck, I needed to do this. I needed to talk about this with you guys. Can confirm sometimes wore girl clothes and played with girls' toys, but never once insisted I was a girl. Not very complicated. Exactly! It's not complicated. Your gender identity is your identity. You get to forge it. You get to have it. It is yours. And Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. Incredibly generous of you and very much appreciated. So, all that being said, one last little note here for you all, which is that, wouldn't you know it, Ben Appel is the author of that memoir. And that memoir's title is Cis, White, Gay, The Making of a Gender Heretic. So cool. And you know, I do have to say, there is something apropos here about using a marble sculpture of like a white guy, you know, white marble sculpture here. Because many of those sculptures in the past were painted. In the past, they were complete. They were undamaged. And in the process of branding his book, Ben Appel has essentially used this degraded and broken version of identity, this degraded and broken image, and associates it with his identity. You know, it's distorted in a way. I think that's really fitting. I don't think it's intentionally fitting, but I think it fits nonetheless. Cis, white, gay, the making of a gender heretic. And I do want to note here that I find it interesting that in the Atlantic piece, he doesn't write the name of his memoir when he's talking about, oh, let's see here, what was it? Yeah, another old friend wrote on my Facebook page after I published a memoir late last year, "You and your book are disgusting." Because maybe it would have been a little bit more self-explanatory why that old friend found this book disgusting when it deliberately sets itself up as a book that is, you know, going to war against trans people. And a book that equates transgender rights with, again, let's just zoom in here, only to find himself in a new cult devoted to queerness, anti-Zionism, and anti-Western radicalism. Because, of course, being against a settler colonial ideology that embraces extermination of those different would be a part of all of that. So, anyway, all that being said, I think we will conclude our foray into Ben Appel's work here.
Way behind Jack, but monsters and Fettermans killed me.
Logan Hill, I'm glad you enjoyed that joke a lot. Thank you for the $5 super chat. And also, folks, if you got anything out of this, leave a like, comment, comments longer than 8 words apparently do better in the algorithm. Hit the subscribe button. And we need to get organized. Okay? We need to get organized, and we need to get louder than the Ben Apples of the world. Okay? We need to actually fight for trans rights. We need to fight for LGBTQ people of all types. And we need to make sure that we are able to actually once and for all settle this issue in the realm of politics. Join your local Dems, join your local DSA, make your Democrats more progressive, make your DSA more effective. If you need help doing that, join our Discord, reach out to GamerG for help with your DSA, reach out to Dragonfly for help with your local Dems. And folks, I will also say, last but not least, especially if you want to piss off someone like Ben Appel, check out ImagenaOlivia.com. Gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes, tested with cis men, cis women, non-binary folks. It is non-tucking lingerie. It is incredibly comfortable, incredibly sexy, and we have new colors, styles, and sizes coming in the near future. So go check that out. Link down in the description. Let's keep on going.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, gaming, plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat Jack.